All right, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on the time zone you are joining us from, and welcome to this Nanotechnology Industries Association webinar on quality of information and practical tools for enhanced safety. Before jumping into today's topic, I would just want to take a moment to briefly introduce the NIA and what we do. We're an industry association based in Brussels with offices across Europe, but we are global in our membership coverage. And we work to support the successful development and market uptake of nanomaterials and nanotechnologies. In order to do this, we support our members primarily with understanding what kind of rules their products have to comply with in order to be placed on the market, with developing a good narrative about the enabling potential of nanotechnologies so that their end users can have trust in both the product performance and its safety. And we also work as a platform where companies as well as potential adopters of the technology can come together and exchange on the respective needs and on their products. In order to do this, we participate in a number of stakeholder fora so that we can bring the voice of the industry to the table in all the relevant discussions on regulatory and policy developments that affect them. We support activities of networking that bring together the research community and the industry so that all actors in the nano ecosystem can talk and exchange about their needs and their solutions. And we support the build-up of the commercial ecosystem that is needed for nanotechnology to successfully enter the market. And that is why our members are not limited to the producers and users of nanomaterials, but also include the research community with a number of research institutes and universities, but also the providers of the collateral services that are needed to successfully bring these products to the market. In terms of activities, I have already briefly mentioned bringing the industry voice to the table when regulatory and policy developments that affect the industry are discussed, but we also have some work on standardization. And while we have activities that are aimed at the broader public, we also do some member work specifically on regulations so that members have access to additional materials that can help them in their daily work. Now, you are participating in a webinar of the series that we actually launched long before COVID forced us all to move our activities online. We are hopeful that next year we can also start to bring back some of the in-person events like our annual conference, the symposium, as well as the Nano Pavilion, which is an NIA-sponsored booth in relevant trade shows where members can participate and use to display their products and services. We have a very active LinkedIn community that I would invite you to join if you're not a part of it yet. And we're a member of a number of industry coalitions as well as EU-funded projects related to different aspects of nanomaterials. Now, if you're joining this webinar, you probably already receive our newsletter, but if that isn't the case and you have heard of the event from another source, you can make sure to register and receive our monthly updates. You can follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And of course, we're always interested to also hear from organizations that are interested to become involved at a deeper level. And as you have seen before, our membership categories cover pretty much the whole ecosystem of the nano community. So if you're interested in discussing membership, you know where to find us. And with that, I would hand over to our first speaker of today. So Patrick Moungang from Yordas Group, where he is hazard communication consultant. Yordas is one of the NIA members, one of those members in the category I mentioned earlier on service providers. And Patrick, if you want to start sharing your screen and start presenting your slides, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Chiara. Thank you for the great introduction. And I hope that you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to this part of the webinar, Nanomaterials Communication of Safety Information in the Supply Chain, how to achieve high quality safety datasheet and comply with the new regulations. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. The first part will be the safety datasheet and the REACH Enforce project from the EU. We talk about the basic regulation of the safety datasheet and what is planned in order to improve the quality of the safety datasheet within the European Union. The second part will be about the nanomaterial itself. We will get back to the raw definition of nanoscale, moving on to the definition in the regulations. The third part is about the REACH for Nanoform. How does it look in the REACH for Nanoform? What are the basis for the Nanoform? What are the requirements from REACH concerning nanoforms? And the last part will be the safety datasheet for nanoforms. So the specific requirements for nanoform in the safety datasheet. Before starting, I will use a few words about Yordas. Yordas Group is a leading international provider of scientific and technical services, regulatory advice, sustainability services, and training to industry in the field of chemicals management and risk assessment. We are headquartered in the UK with offices in North America, Europe, Middle East, and a representation in Asia Pacific, Eurasia, and South America. Yordas delivers innovative solutions for business, industry, and government across a broad range of industries. Our strapline, Business Through Science, reflects our drive to underpin our work with exceptional technical and scientific expertise. Here at Yordas, we offered a broad range of services that have developed from our roots in chemicals, regulatory management, and product stewardship. From hazard communications, scientific analysis, and green chemistry to software development, risk hazard assessment, and quality management systems, we can help you to work towards a better, safer world for all. We have partners in different sectors of industry and life. So we have industry association as partner, as the NIA, and reason why we are holding this webinar. And even in the private sectors and in academia, with the Lancaster University, we have a couple of projects that we are doing together. Concerning nanomaterials, we are also involved in a bunch of European-funded research projects, such as Gracious, Sun, Nano-Explore, Sunshine. I am Patrick Moungang. I am a regulatory consultant at Yordas Group. I have over 6 years safety datasheet and labor authoring experience in consultancy and industry for different kind of regulations, such as the EU CLP regulation, and even have expertise in product notification to different poison centers, especially European poison centers. And as a former EHS manager, I also have experience in risk analysis, storage, and safe disposal of chemicals used on site. Now coming to the first part of our presentation, the safety datasheet. So what's the safety datasheet? What is the key regulation within the Europe for the safety datasheet? As you may know, the key regulation are first the REACH regulation and the CIP regulation. But in the REACH regulation, in its Article 31, it states under which condition some have to provide the safety data sheets to the downstream user. And the product distributor is responsible for ensuring that the safety data sheet is factually correct and filled out in full. That will be the subject of this presentation. And you have to provide the safety data sheet as a distributor or manufacturer or duty holders if your product is classified as hazardous according to the CIP regulation, or has persistent bioaccumulative or very persistent or very bioaccumulative ingredients, or ingredient included in the candidate list of very high concern chemicals. And there are always adaptation of the REACH regulation, especially of the Annex 2 regulation. And this new information has to be taken into consideration. So because this new information can have an impact on the risk assessment, and there may be some approval or restriction of some chemical that you are using in your safety data sheet, so that you have the duty to keep your safety data sheet up to date. Annex 2 of the safety data sheet give which kind or how many sections the safety data sheet should have. You have in total 16 sections. Section 1 about the identification, Section 2 the hazard identification, Section 4 the first aid measure, Section 5 firefighting measure, and so on. And each different section of the safety data sheet can be used in emergencies situation from different entities. Like the firefighter, we directly read the Section 5, and the doctors, we read the Section 4 to have more information about the first aid measure. And for substances, you may have extended safety data sheet according to Article 31 of the REACH, where you have to include the chemical safety report of your chemical as an annex of your safety data sheet. And now is the question for each one of us that has even have a safety data sheet in front of him. You may figure out that sometimes there's a lack of information, or a big lack of information in the safety data sheet. And the European Union is also aware of that. And that's the reason why there's a REACH Enforce forum created from the EU. The REACH Enforce is a forum for exchange of information on enforcement of the REACH regulation or CIP regulation, for example, for all EU countries, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. The forum itself is composed of one representative from each member state, ECHA Forum Secretariat and ECHA Secretariat, invited experts from the member state, European Commission, and accredited stakeholder organizations. How the forum works. The forum set its program based on the list of tasks specified in the REACH CIP and the regulation that they want to enforce. There are 10 working groups providing solutions to specific areas of enforcement, and they hold 3 plenary meetings each year. And the main goal of the forum is to improve the protection of human health and environment through the enforcement of the different European regulations. Concerning the safety data sheet, there was a REACH Enforce project in 2013, and they found out that every second safety data sheet was defective. So there was a lack of information. On the right side, you can see a graphic about how many safety data sheet was controlled at that time and how the deficient is. You can see that it doesn't matter how big or how small a company is. So fact is, in fact, every second safety data sheet has a lack of information. So for the REACH Enforce 11 is the following to this REACH Enforce for the year 2013, and it will be a EU-wide enforcement project. And they will control the quality of information in the safety data sheets, check the compliance with the revised requirement EU 2020-878 on the Annex 2 of the REACH, and we talk about it further. So what is the timeline of the REACH Enforce project? The project will take place in 2022. The inspections will be performed in 2023, and a report will be produced in 2024. So now we will see why this date. As I told you before, there's an amendment of the Annex 2 of the REACH regulation coming into force since the 1st January 2021. And before that, it was the former amendment was the EU 2015-830, and the two amendments can be used until the end of the year 2022. That means the safety data sheets that will be provided after the 31 of December 2022 has to be in the format according to the last amendment of the Annex 2, which is 2020-878. This new amendment brings a couple of modifications. As I said before, it's effective from the 1st January of this year. And the Article 2 may be provided, the article of the 2015 may be continued to be provided until the end of the year. And you can introduce right now the unique formula or use the unique formula identifier. And there's also an update concerning nanoforms of substance. It is an adaptation of the 6th and the 7th version or revision of the GSS. So before the end of 2022, you have to ensure that all your safety data should comply with the new regulation. And if you need help on this, of course, you can contact us. Now let us back to the nanomaterial. Nanomaterial comes from the nanoscale. We know that it's an extremely small range. We are talking about 1 billionth. And but the regulation, or there was a EU recommendation from the 18th of October 2011, giving some proposal or some recommendation as a definition from nanomaterial. It is about the particle size. It's the main criteria, as we can see here. And this recommendation is broadly applicable across the regulatory field and is not legally binding. And we should keep in mind this range for 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer given by the recommendation. If you can see here on this slide, we are talking about the range of some molecule like glucose, protein, or some virus. These properties or this physical characteristic of nanomaterial give them some property, such as a very high surface to area volume ratio, high percentage of atoms at the surface, which may increase the reactivities of the nanomaterial with the material outside. We can see here on this graphic what is the difference between the normal state of a substance or the bulk state of the substance and the nanomaterial. So from the left, you see this cube with 6 square meter. If it's just react with 6 surfaces. And if you have the nanoform, so that each element in this cube, each nanoform can react with some chemical, you see that the reaction is more willing to give a result than a normal a normal molecule or a bulk molecule. And with this, it is a huge possibility to considerably improve and even revolutionize technology and industry sectors. In medicine, you have the application in gold nanoparticle. In transport, we can use this technology for low rolling resistance tires, and in food safety, even to clean and drinking water. But in this way, due to this characteristic, there's also a positive point for the nanoform compared to the bulk form or to the ionic form. You can see here how a biological cell may react in this against these three different state of the substance. So the nanoform will be absorbed by the biological system. And is it a reason for concern? Can a nanoform better get into the organs than other chemicals? Can the biological response be increased or renewed due to the increase of reactivities? That are some questions that we may ask because of this particle characteristics. And due to this modification that it brings, like the size, distribution, the shape, the surface functionalization, and so on. And for this reason, there may be some information given through the supply chain. And that is why nanoform or nanomaterial become more and more a challenge for the REACH regulations. And the REACH regulation has also defined nanoform in accordance or on the basis of this recommendation that I have written before. And in the difference to this recommendation, they are not talking about material, but substances, and there's no flexibility of the 50% threshold, and it's legally binding. And since the 1st of January 2020, manufacturer has some requirement concerning the REACH and nanoform. They may provide the characterization of nanoform or sets of nanoform, and they should make the chemical safety assessment, give some registration information, and transmit it to the downstream user. Those information can be like the name, the number based particle size distribution, the shape, the crystallinity, the surface functionalization treatment, specific surface area, additional information. And they have to provide it for each form, for each nanoform of the substance. So, and they also have to submit some studies or testing proposal to the REACH or to the ECHA. And all this information doesn't stay in the ECHA data set, but it has to be transmitted through the supply chain, through the different users of the substance. And that brings us back to the safety data sheet for nanoform and this amendment of Annex 2 of the REACH regulation. According to the new regulation 2020-878, now in the safety data sheet, you have until the end of the year 2022, and to put in your subsection 1.1 an indication if you have a nanoform in your safety data sheet. You have here on the slide 2 example. If your safety data sheet covers both nanoform and non-nanoform, you can indicate it as well in section 1 of the safety data sheet. Moving to section 3 of the safety data sheet, as you may know, this is subsection 3.1 is just if you have a substance, and section 3.2 is if you have mixtures. but the tooth section or the requirement for the tooth section are similar. So if the substance is registered as a nanoform, the particle characteristics shall be indicated in this subsection of the safety datasheet. You have the example here with carbon black. The author indicated the shape, the size range, and the specific surface area, for example. And on the right side, there is no indication, and that will be not more be in accordance with the regulation after 2022, right? And the last section of safety data sheets, where you can find some modification according to the new regulation, is the section 9.1, where you have to give additional solubility information on the nanoform. If the dissolution rate in water and other relevant biological or environmental measure shall be indicated. And even the partition coefficient in external water, if it doesn't apply, you have to give the dispersion stability in different media. And the last point is about the particle characteristics. You should indicate it as well in this subsection 9.1, or refer to another section, for example, section 3, if you still insert or indicated this information there. So, and here it's a bunch of sources where you can have more information about the nanomaterial, the REACH regulation, how to make the registration of your nanomaterial ingredients, and some more information about the REACH enforce project. So if you have further information, or you need further information, or need support on how to give information on your nanomaterial in the safety datasheet, or how to register it via ECHA, you can always contact me. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Something I didn't mention at the beginning, but I will mention now, is that we will take all questions at the beginning. So if you have any questions, hold on until the Q&A session. I am now going to try to do something that is a first for me in these webinars, which is to hand over to a speaker who is not here yet, because Rudolf Bieri from StatPale can only join us for the Q&A. So he has kindly prepared his presentation in advance. We tested it this morning and everything went well, so I have no doubt that something will go wrong now. So if you just give me a few seconds, I will put his presentation up and start it. Another NIA colleague, could you perhaps just confirm that you can see the starting screen of the video?
Good afternoon. My name is Rudolf Bieri. I'm the founder and CEO of StatPale. Thanks for having me. In the next couple of minutes, I'd like to give you a short introduction about our detection system identifier and how it can help you monitor exposure to nanomaterials in production and laboratory environments. The reason why I pre-recorded this presentation is because we are currently exhibiting at the Battery Europe trade show in Stuttgart. If you happen to attend the show, please come and visit us at the booth number 8359. I'll be available for question and answer later on as I dial in by phone. A few words about StatPale. We're a young Swiss company located in the canton of Glarus, which is in the center of Switzerland, about 1 hour south of Zurich. There used to be a lot of factories here. One that is still around is Eternit, which used to be a big user of asbestos to produce all kinds of cement plates. Our lab used to be located in that environment, so we're very familiar with fibrous materials and the negative impact they can have on your health. And so when we saw a couple of years ago the advent of carbon nanotubes and how difficult it is to detect them, I thought that could be a very interesting topic to build an analytical instrument to monitor those fibers. It's not only the shape of a particle that drives toxicity, there's a whole parameter set that has an impact on how toxic a material is. For sure, size plays an important role, but then also crystallinity, surface charges, and so forth. During manufacturing and handling and maintenance work, you always have a potential release of dangerous materials. Of course, you have to have engineering controls in place to reduce such a potential release. There are always particles present, as you can see here from a laser scanning picture of one of our filters from a clean environment. And if you look at the SEM image of such a filter, it's very difficult to see if you have certain dangerous particles there or not. And regular aerosol measurement tools can give you an indication of what kind of materials, particles you have flying around. So as you see in this image here, we have ambient air mixed with carbon nanotubes, but you have no indication if there are carbon nanotubes in there. Additionally, today's personal exposure workflow is rather cumbersome. People have to wear large pumps, they have to wear cyclones and hoses, and then the loaded filters are returned to a lab with a multi-step process where they look for the materials of interest. It's error prone, it's slow, and it's rather expensive. By designing our solution, we took a slightly different approach. We wanted to make sure personal exposure monitoring can be done easily on a regular basis with immediate results. This is our dosimeter detection system identifier. Here you see the three main parts. On the left, the filtration slide, which contains nanoporous filtration membranes where the filtered particles deposit. In the middle, the portable, lightweight and silent filtration badge, which is worn by the user throughout the day. And then on the right side, the reader, which contains a Raman spectrometer, a handling unit, and an industrial PC. The loaded filters are inspected by the reader during the off hours and during the night. The green lock indicates that only authorized personnel have access to the exposure data. So far, we've talked only about personal exposure monitoring, but the system can be also used for stationary monitoring. This is up to the authorized person to decide. Over the next few slides, I'm going to show you how a user interacts with the identifier. The system is as easy to operate as a punch clock. In the morning, the user shows up and it uses its RFID card or an access code. The system will indicate which badge to remove and place into the red loading drawer on their side. The system then inserts a clean filtration slide, starts up the badge, checks if everything is okay, and if this is the case, the user can remove the badge and wear it. The user wears the badge throughout the day. A small amount of air is pumped through the badge and particles are deposited on the filter. The badge also records all relevant parameters like airflow, temperature, humidity, and the user movement. The badge doesn't contain any display or any buttons to make sure user interaction doesn't mess up the measurement. At the end of the workday, the user goes back to the reader, logs in, and inserts the badge for slide removal into the reader on the right side. The loaded filtration slide is removed. The system tells the user to put the badge into the charging bay on the left side, and the user can go home. The loaded filters are inspected during the off hours or whenever the supervisor thinks it's necessary. To get a material selective result, we use Raman spectroscopy. I don't know if you're familiar with that method, so I'd like to show you on one example how powerful it is. In our laboratory, we took carbon black and a small amount of carbon nanotubes, we mixed it up and ran it through our aerosolization setup. In there, we had a batch which filtered the air, and a small amount of carbon black and carbon nanotube was deposited on the filtration membrane. Here you see an SEM of that loaded membrane. Carbon nanotubes are obviously much more dangerous than carbon black. Therefore, if you have a filter loaded with carbon black and carbon nanotubes on it, and if you run them with a standard protocol like NIOSH 5040 with TOA, which you see on the left here, you'll get an elemental carbon signal. Unfortunately, you don't know what the contribution from the carbon black and what the contribution from the carbon nanotube is. On the other hand, if you use Raman spectroscopy with the identifier, you know exactly what the contribution from the carbon nanotubes is. It's even possible to see different contributions from different types of carbon nanotubes, for example, single wall, multi-wall, or graphene nanoplatelets. If you're sampling in an area where carbon nanotubes are handled with a method like TOA, you will get an elemental carbon signal that's likely above the recommended exposure limit for carbon nanotubes. It's very important for you to know if you're really above the limit or not. So by using the StatPale identifier, it will tell you what the real contribution of carbon nanotube within that limit is. We even give you a graphic indication of where the carbon nanotube or the carbon black particles are located on the filtration membrane. The detected material mass on the membranes, together with the flow information from the batch, is used to calculate the exposure. It's possible then to see your employees' personal exposure over an extended period of time. Additional data are available, like temperature, humidity, movement profiles of that employee on any given day. It's up to the supervisor then to create customs reports and export them in different formats. In the example I showed earlier, you saw how we can monitor carbon nanotubes among other particles. The identifier can be used to monitor any material that has a certain Raman response. So this is possible, for example, for graphene, for boron nitride nanotubes, in general any oxides and nitrides, but also different types of plastics can be monitored, or even pharmaceutical active ingredients. The list you see here is not complete, it's just for your information. Let's summarize the benefits the identifier can bring to your laboratory and production environment. First and foremost, more accurate results. Monitor the real exposure to materials of interest. Continuous monitoring instead of occasional spot checks once or twice a year. Get daily exposure and activity updates on your screen regardless of where you are. The data is kept confidential and only accessible to selected professionals. Upgrade the identifier to communicate and integrate to your ERP system. Second, save resources. Fully automated monitoring and data management without the need to be on site. No hassles with filters, hoses, pumps, and shipping samples out. Data and filters are traceable and archivable by design. Third, communicate. Comprehensive data to communicate with management. Data to base investments and training on. Data to show the situation to plant managers and employees. Monitor progress of implemented programs. It's very easy to try out the capabilities of the identifier. We created a little sampling kit which we can send to your site. You run it in your facility and you return the loaded filters to our lab for inspection. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Here you can find our contact details and I will be delighted to talk to you in the future. Thank you very much and talk to you later.
All right. Well, thanks to Rudolf. We'll thank him also in person when he joins for the Q&A. And we can hand over to the final speaker for today, Felix Klee, who's CEO and founder at DermaPurge. I will let you put your slides on the screen, Felix, and then whenever you're ready, you can start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you see the screen and also?
Yes.
Hear? Yeah, okay, perfect. So welcome everyone, and thanks a lot to Patrick and Rudolf for the very interesting talks. that we've seen and that are also linked to what I'm talking about in several aspects. So my name is Felix Klee. I'm part of the startup DermaPurge. We are based at the Leibniz Institute of Polymer Research in Dresden in Germany. And we've developed Nano-Ex for effective removal of nanoparticles from the skin. And I would like to present you what we've developed, but also the underlying challenge for occupational health in nanotechnology. So why did we come up with this? Because we had the problem ourselves. A few years ago, here at our research institute, a colleague was working with cadmium selenide quantum dots, and she was wearing the usual protective clothes, but she spilled the particles on her glove, and then the particles went from the glove underneath her coat on her skin. And due to the fluorescence of the particles, it was easy to see that she was not able to wash off the nanoparticles from her skin effectively. And so we looked more closely at the problem, and also in literature, it was shown that nanoparticles are quite difficult to remove from the skin with water. And eventually we came up with a gel that is very effective in binding all kinds of nanoparticles. And we, as a startup, have been working on developing this gel into a ready-to-use first aid application that we can then present to our colleagues in nanotechnology. And we call it Nano-Ex. We also like to call it the eye shower for the skin, because that already shows you the use case. First of all, prevention is key. So you want to prevent, obviously, dermal exposure in the first place. But if something happens, and if it comes to dermal exposure, this gel and our innovation is basically the best possible protection to wash off nanoparticles from the skin. And there's a very wide range of applications. Of course, looking at laboratories, among our customers are universities, but also non-university research institutions like Max Planck Institutes or Fraunhofer and so on. But also laboratories from research and development in industry. And looking at industry, there's also a wide range of processes where nanoparticles are being used in the process, or they're coming up with during the process, such as during laser sintering, for example. So let's step back a little, something that Patrick already talked about in detail. Safety data sheets are unfortunately often outdated and and of poor quality, something that we hope will improve with the announced enforcement project REF-11. One specific aspect that we noticed is the recommendations in the safety data sheets on what to do after dermal exposure. We see that often those recommendations may be true if you're looking at the bulk material, but of course the same does not apply to material properties in the nanoscale. And a substance that you may be able to wash off with water, if it's in a micrometer size range, you may have difficulties washing that substance off if it's in the nano range. So that's a very important aspect and often overlooked. So let's talk about the problems of dermal exposure. It's very important that the risk is not only about dermal uptake into the body, so uptake via the skin directly. More importantly, if the particles do not penetrate the skin and you are not able to wash off the particles from the skin, you have the risk of contamination carry over, and for example, oral uptake via hand-mouth contact. And so for occupational health and nanotechnology, we really need a solution that is up to the state of the art. One very interesting article I would like to reference and that you might want to take a look at if this is of interest. A working group of the Gracious Network has just published this piece in August this year and proposed grouping methods for the risk of oral ingestion of nanomaterials. And it also contains some references to studies that show the risks deriving from oral uptake. So this is also something to take a look at in detail. One more aspect is that in many safety data sheets, we still see that after dermal contamination, the recommendation is to wash off particles with water and soap. This is a problem because, first of all, it's not effective. This is not just shown by our studies, but has also been shown by other researchers already. Second problem is that soap opens up the pores of the skin, and it may lead to an increased uptake of the substance, which is called the wash-in effect. This is already well known, and for example, in the German guidelines for dermal contact with hazardous substances, it is explicitly stated that in case of dermal exposure to hazardous substances, you should not use soaps, surfactants, or solvents, because it may lead to an increased risk of those hazardous substances. This is why we, right from the start, developed the gel without any soaps or other so-called penetration enhancers. So this is very important because we wanted to make sure that our gel does not impair the barrier function of the skin. This gel is very effective for all particles in the size range between 4 nanometers and 3 micrometers, and it's effective for all materials. And it's not just effective, but also, that is very important, it's skin compatible, which has just been stated by DermaTest. And as a startup, we are also very excited that we just won the Wiley Analytical Science Award for Best Innovation for Lab Equipment in 2021. So here you can see how Nano-Ex is being applied. Important aspect, it comes with a sponge applicator. And with the sponge, you can rub in the gel onto the skin, and also with the sponge, you can wash off the gel. The sponge is important because using the sponge, you do not have to use your hand, for example, and so you do not get in touch with the contaminated skin area, so you reduce the risk of secondary contamination. And looking at the black color of the gel, it's very easy to track where have you applied the gel, and once you have washed off the gel, which parts of the skin have been cleaned thoroughly. So this tube I just showed, this has been developed from lab perspective and is optimized for laboratories and small-scale exposure. Looking at industry, of course, there are also requirements for the case of large-scale contaminations, but also in some cases, there's a requirement for more frequent use. And so this is why we've also developed our dispenser system. So, looking at our roadmap, I think it's very important to enable updates of safety data sheets. This is why we've also proposed a new phrase for the UFOC catalog, and after communication with the moderators, the final proposal right now is that in safety data sheets, it can now be installed after contact with skin, wash immediately with plenty of water and a soap-free product that is suitable for binding nanoparticles. So that is also the market-neutral phrase, which does not roll out other solutions that are as effectively. Second of all, it's very important to raise awareness because often dermal exposure is kind of a blind spot when you look at the risk of oral uptake that can be derived. So we are in touch with the DGUV, for example. This is the German Statutory Accident Insurance, which are, after our presentation of our innovation and the problems underneath, they're right now evaluating whether they should update their guidelines on safe working with nanoparticles. And this is also something that may be discussed in other countries eventually. Third of all, for us as a startup, this is also important to mention that we are also right now looking at the next few years and how to roll out our innovation to the international nanotechnology community. And we are actively screening partnerships in other countries and certain industrial markets. So to sum it up, of course, you cannot say it often enough, prevention is key. You want to prevent exposure in the first place. Second, if it comes to dermal exposure, we have to keep in mind that this is also linked to risk of oral uptake, which sometimes is a blind spot. Third of all, nanoparticles are more difficult to remove from the skin with water than larger particles. And looking at our studies, we see a tendency here that the smaller the particles and the more hydrophobic the particles, the more difficult they are to remove from the skin. The fourth point is we do need to work on updating the safety data sheets and bring the information to the state of the art, because the information is already out there. We need to communicate it effectively. And fifth of all, our partnership opportunity for distributors and nanotech to work together to bring this innovation and this state of the art into the nanotechnology community. So this is all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Felix. I was just checking, I don't think Rudolf has joined yet. So what I would suggest we do is opening the floor to questions for Patrick and Felix to begin with. So I'm just going to invite everyone to either raise a virtual hand or type your question in the chat, and you can also just unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, I see that actually colleague has put a question in the chat, so I'll just read it out loud for everyone. So this is for Patrick. When you spoke about REF-11 project, can you maybe talk a little more about the timeline? Because obviously we are all aware of the fact that the pandemic has affected a number of ongoing activities. So do you think the timeline will remain relatively unaffected?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yes, I said in my slide, the forum has a meeting 3 times a year, and they have this a working group divided into 10, as a 10 working group. And the last enforcement forum of this year was in November, from the 9th to the 12th of November. And they are still started with the preparation for the REF enforcement 11 to improve the quality of the information, the safety data. So I think on this point or on this timeline, the ECHA has taken his disposition to follow the deadline, and also to be in accordance with this new regulation. As I said, we have until December 2022 to comply with the new amendment of the Annex 2 for the safety data sheet.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps I also have a question. I'm going to ask it if nobody else wants to go ahead. So the thing is, on the nanoforms and the data. So if there is no data on the nanoform is used in a particular mixture, but there are data available on the different nanoforms of the substance, how would that work?
Thanks again for the question. Yeah, concerning the information of the nanoform. So as I say, for the registration of your substance, you have to give the information for each nanoform that you will use in your product. And if you don't have some toxicological information, for example, for this nanoform, but you have it for the other nanoform of your substance, you can handle it similarly to the information or the toxicological information in the safety datasheet, meaning that you can provide this information to the ECHA, but you have to make some indication so that they can really see that the information that you've given to them is not for the nanoform that you are using, but for a different nanoform of the same substance. And yeah, if you have a concrete case on this, you can, of course, let us know, contact Yordas, and we will help you to provide the right information to ECHA.
Okay, thank you. I'll just pause a second to see if there are any questions for Felix as well.
Hi, I have a question for Felix. So I would like to know.
Yeah, no, sorry, Nicolina. I was just going to say you sound a bit muffled. I don't know if you're far from your microphone.
I have a headset on. Can you hear me now?
That's much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. So I was wondering, what is the function principle of Nano-Ex? How does it work to effectively bind all kinds of nanoparticles?
Yes, thank you for that question. I would like to hand over the question to Jonas Schubert, who's also here today. And
yeah, so the gel works like this, that we have a water-soluble polymer in there. This is generating a hydrophobic gradient, which makes the particles to detach from the skin surface, and then they are immobilized on solid substances that have a high specific surface, for example, phyllosilicates and activated carbon. And we tested it in a worst case approach. So we used the particles that are known to penetrate the skin most easily and are most difficult to remove, that were cadmium selenide particles. And here we optimized our product so that we can remove more than 99%. And then we tested all other particles that we had in the lab from different categories like metal oxide or metal particles and polymeric particles, and we could remove them all more than 99%.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And a follow-up question, because you did mention about the next steps, sort of like the uptake of the Nano-Ex, etc. I was wondering if the gel is actually already like currently available, or what is sort of the time frame where we can expect to have that?
yes, so we are already on the market since the summer, and we are actively distributing Nano-Ex within the European Union. And we are right now talking to distributors with established sales channels that are catering to, on the one hand side, the research environment, and on the other hand side, to various industrial branches. And yes, so it is available within the European Union, and we are looking forward to roll out this innovation worldwide step by step next year.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. So I didn't see Rudolf joining us yet. I wonder, I guess he might be in meetings in Stuttgart. So we'll give it perhaps half a minute. And if you have questions for him, you can actually send them to us afterwards, and we're happy to follow up after the event. But I would suggest, Nicolina, we maybe already stop the recording and thank